Hello and welcome back to Bricking It. Well, it's been a while since my last video. I just haven't been able to match up my brickling order deliveries with my filming schedule, but finally the planets have aligned and I can move on to my next project. This week we're going to be looking at the construction of my Three Broomsticks MOC. So this is a bit of an odd shape, and the dimensions of this one, well, are led by a dimension space. Unintentional pun. I've had these large bases for a long time. I just ordered them because they were an interesting shape, and they came with the old Lego dimension set. It wasn't quite what I needed for this project, so I've had to extend, as you can see, a couple of bricks and plates just to make it a little larger and more suitable for the project in hand. As I said, this is going to be the not leaky cauldron. That's my current project. This is going to be the Three Broomsticks. So I've laid out the tiling pattern with where all of our details are going to go, including the two snugs in the corner, and this snug or this little seat back here is where we're going to make a start on our build. Now, as ever, my builds are disguised as books in a bookcase when they're not being displayed, so I need brackets on the back of some of my builds just to hold the bookshelf pieces in place. Now, this build is going to seem a bit odd as we go on, but all will become clear as we move through the build. Just going to build out the back wall and fireplace now. Missed a stud there. And for the fire, I'm just going to use these two pieces just so we can tilt them back into the fireplace, get a bit more depth in our build. This build is based on the version we see in Half-Blood prints. So we're going to have Dean and Ginny in the back here on their date, just enjoying a butterbeer. That's the first part of our build. Need one more layer of bricks just to stabilise connections here. And we'll move on to the next section of the back wall a little later. Moving into the main bar, I'm going to start by building up some pillars. Then we're going to put together the snug that we see at the front of the bar. It's all just made up of palisade bricks and of course the brackets that we need for book covers. It's going to be the front snug. Alright, final portion of our snug wall is now in position, for the ground floor at least. Now we can start moving on to the main feature of this side of the build. Now, if I remember what I'm doing while I'm editing this, what you should be seeing on screen now is some pictures of this side of the leaky cauldron. And obviously its most prominent feature is that wall of antlers. This was going to be a pretty tricky subject to tackle, so I basically cheated. Let's carry on with the fireplace. Fairly simple, just using 2 layers of these railed plates to get the thickness of our fireplace mantle, bring it up to the same height as the supporting column. And to make the stepped chimney breast, we need to use a variety of different what are these called? Snot bricks. There we go. So they're all in place now for the first level, and then there's our top level. Now, using these, because obviously they are studs with bar connections in them, we're able to use studs and anti-studs, and that only really applies to this 1x3 piece that we're going to be using at the bottom here. Oh, no, I've managed to completely miss it. That's because it's on the wrong side. There we go. So that gives us a half brick offset for the first layer. Second layer we want to be on the stud line. Third layer I'm going to use this jumper. And again we're going for a half brick offset and finish off with a 1x2, and that gives us our stepped chimney breast. And the last part of the fireplace on this side. That fairly well replicates what we see in the movie. Now, as I was saying, there's a tricky bit to come. That was going to be all of the trophies that are up on the wall here. So I made one. Obviously it's not ideal. Sort of looks like a deer skull if you know what you're looking at. And I've tried this a few different ways, but as this is going to be primarily viewed from the side, I wanted it to be thin, and my previous versions and my preferred version actually stuck out a little bit too far. But we get roughly the idea of what we're going for. That can live up here on the mantelpiece. Now for the rest of them, as I said, I cheated. So all that I've used is one of these shield posts pieces in tan. I'm going to find a focus there on a roughly wooden coloured background. These are going to be scattered across the wall at various irregular spaces, just to create our large trophy wall. Going to integrate that with the back wall just for a little more stability. At this stage we have another cross beam, because at this level we actually start transitioning into the pitched roof portion of the build, and I'm going to do that with these. Now, I'm still one piece short, despite saying I finally got all my parts orders synchronized. Still haven't got one of these. Oh, or have I? That order had in fact arrived, so I have got a complete one. Should probably finish this wall off first before I start thinking about roofs. There we go. I'm just going to start integrating these inverted slopes in, using some in white as well, just to give the illusion of the roof itself, so that we only see part of this as a beam. Now obviously this wouldn't necessarily work on a full building if you were doing interior and exterior, as it's just interior that we need to think about. We can just use these to get the shape that we're looking for more than anything else. Integrating brackets as we go to make the roof that we need, and a bit of tiling off. There's our corner mostly done. Obviously we've got some more details to add. That gives a rough approximation of the look we're going for. So that's the snug built and the first nook. Now we're going to start working over here on the bar area. So this is a fairly simple part of the build. Just adding our walls. Pillar up this end. Of course we've got to integrate our brackets into the build. In this corner of the bar, just going to add a little shelf. So again, we can add a bit more decoration and detail. Just going to put a couple of bottles up on the shelf there. And actually are integral to the build. The rest of the wall is fairly simple construction, added a bit of texture and colour change, and of course the brackets that I need are on the back. That's going to fit in there. The rest of the wall follows a similar sort of style, with the pitch roof just starting to come in. But above the bar, if we look at some set photos, hopefully editor me is worth the money and you're seeing those now. The wall kind of thickens just above the bar, so the bar is almost under this overhang. So we've just thickened up the wall a bit there. It attaches to those bottles to give it a bit more of an anchor point. And that's our bar area added in. Now, as you might notice, at the back here, lots of brackets for our rear part, but we've got no side walls on the rear of the build, and that's because they're all going to be built with a snot technique, just so I don't have to use up any of the real estate inside the build. I can just add my walls onto the outside. So these have already been built up on a 2x16 plate, and they will attach to my first row of brackets to create side walls. Now you really can't see these walls once the build is on. And this one we've got the side wall of the snug. So once those are in place, we can see much more clearly how our build is going to appear. In the back there. So now it's all a bit wobbly and flexible, and we need to start integrating it together. So the first thing we're going to do is add a balcony. Now again, in our set photography, we can see that this balcony leads up to what appears to be a small seating area, but it also leads off to the various rooms upstairs in the inn. And I will be using this area as a little private seating area if I want to recreate the scene with Rosmerta and Fudge and McGonagall in the movie version. If I'm doing the book version, then they'll be down here because they also have Flitwick and Hagrid with them. And then to finish off the back of the upstairs, just a very simple plain wall. You don't need to see me build that. So that's going to go in there. Now all of these have been carefully mathed so that all of these brackets line up with the studs on the back of these walls, and once we add the book cover backing, this will all receive a lot more rigidity and stability. In fact, let's do some of that now. So using an 8x16 plate with some of their faux book covers attached. So we've got a grey side here, so we need a grey book to match up to it. And let me wrestle with this for a moment. Alright, so our first one on. There's a lot of studs to attach to ensure that we've got a strong build at the end of it all. Then on the other side we're using a tan one to match these tan bricks, and we've actually used the History of Magic sticker from the Hedwig set, and that's going to form a slightly flatter book cover. I could have done it on a curve, but I just wanted to add a bit of variety. So let's attach that. So that's the centre portion of our back attached. Sides are much easier, just a collection of plates, and these are more for decoration than for structure, and they will just sit on here like this. So as it appears on the bookshelf, that's how the build will appear. Obviously this section of book sticks out obviously further than the other ones, but I don't mind that. It looks quite good up on the bookshelf, and it gives me the internal structure that I need for my build. Speaking of which, let's carry on by starting to add some details into our leaky cauldron. So as you can see here, we're going to need some more rafters just to complete this build. These ones actually curve out into the main build just to simulate the quite extensive complex of rafters this building's got. Oh, and those backs on was probably a bad idea. Here's a handy tip, kids. Don't put tension into your build until all the parts are in. Do a bit of brick bending to get that bad boy in there. Let's suffer through the same process on this other side. That's our other set of rafters on. Any sensible person would have taken the build apart again. I've never been accused of being sensible. These two rafter sets will connect across here with that main beam that frames up our upper level quite nicely. Now I said this was going to be a separate seating area. So let's add some seating into the build. Please attach. Just add a small little table between these two. That gives us a little private seating area upstairs. Obviously it's not much of a pub without a bar. So we've made a couple of pumps here, just using these tap pieces, shield pieces and levers. We're going to sit on here and grab Madame Rosmerta, pop her behind the bar. And that's the bar finished, almost. Just want to add a little lantern here. We do see these hanging up in the leaky cauldron at various locations. I haven't replicated the same style completely, but it's roughly similar. See, we've got a couple of other points on the walls here. We can add a couple more lanterns into the build. It's always good to have a bit of interest, especially breaking up those large white walls. Now this is where we say goodbye to Ginny and Dean, because they really don't get seen much in this build, because we of course need a way to get upstairs, and that involves a staircase. Now these cone pieces in dark tan are ridiculously expensive and crazy hard to get hold of, so I've gone for reddish brown, as I have along here, and that matches the furniture, so it keeps the flavour of everything the same and adds a little bit of contrast. We haven't got too much of a monolithic slab of colour. So that's our staircase. In our snug here, just going to add a very simple table. It's just a cone and a stud, and then one of these double-sized jumpers on top. Can sit in there. Now it does overlap the fireplace a bit, which is wildly unrealistic, which is why there's no fire in here. We're just going to put a little fire guard, just a 1x3 with some of those upward facing clips on top. It's a style I've used before, just to give a little bit of visual interest. So this is obviously going to be our main seating area, and it's roughly geographically accurate to the movies as to be where Harry, Ron and Hermione sit when they meet up with Professor Slughorn. So we've got these, apologies for the focus, we've got these versions of those characters as they are in the correct outfits, and these all come from the Series 2, I think, CMF. Now the only problem with this is that Hermione doesn't really fit on a chair with all her big old hair, so she's leaning forward a bit, but she's a fairly intense character, so leaning forward seems to fit her. Let's pop the table in and rest all our minifigs chairs under the table. There we go. Oh, butterbeer everywhere. And then of course we'll add Hermione. And then we've got our empty chair just next to her. Oh goodness. Now, that'll teach me to rush. Anyway, after having taken a bit more care, we've got our three heroes in. And of course Harry's got to be waving to somebody. So we have a Professor Slughorn MOC build. We're using Professor Henry Jones's body here. So it's the closest I could come to a tweedy suit, but it works quite nicely. He's got his metal tankard, and he's just going to stand in here. Where is he? Yeah, there he goes. So we can have Harry and Slughorn meeting up in the Three Broomsticks. So we've nearly finished, nearly got all the details on. I'm just going to finish up by adding a couple of chandeliers. They're nice simple builds. Just going to take one of these 4x4 round plates with a hole in the middle. And just by utilising this little setup here, which is one of these, oh goodness, one of these bars with 2 attachment points. And we use these bars with pins. They will nicely fit across the stud diagonal there to create quite a nice little simple chandelier. Then we're going to add some cylinders onto that, and that gives us our build. If you want to add a little bit more detail, you can do that with a little structure of 4 of those studs with bars. Doesn't really add anything to the build, and I think, having lived with it for a few days, that it's an extraneous detail, so I'm going to take that off. Let's put together our final one, and they are going to make use of these extended rafters. Just anti-stud into the bottom there, and that will give us our build. So that is our 3 broomsticks. We've got our trophy wall, our hero table, space for a couple more students. We've got a couple of spots by the stairs and at the bar to add extra minifigs for a bit more interest. Ginny and Dean there can just be seen on their dates in the back snug. And of course Rosmerta at the bar. So there we go, another build complete for our hidden scenes. I'm on a bit of a pub kick at the moment, so I'm actually, as I mentioned earlier, building a Leaky Cauldron interior, and that's based on the Prisoner of Azkaban version of that build. I'm using another fairly popular reference for that build as well, and that one will be available in the fullness of time. For now, all that remains to say is thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please do leave us a like, share with your friends, and for more Wizarding World MOC builds, please subscribe to Brickinet. Bye bye.